Wherever you are in the world, welcome to another edition of Jerry's Take on China. Today, I'm going to talk about freedom of speech, but please like, subscribe, and most importantly of all, share this video. I do need a wider audience. I hear it all the time that China has no freedom of speech. And to be honest, I believed it for many years. I guarded my own speech when I sent text messages. If I wanted to mention something I thought was sensitive, I would misspell it so any surveillance wouldn't pick up on it. Then I started looking at the laws and I found the reality was very different from the perception. What I found was that Article 35 of the Constitution of China states that citizens of China enjoy freedom of speech, of the press, of assembly, of association, procession, and of demonstration. Wow. My first thoughts were, it's okay to say that, but the reality must be different because everyone knows free speech isn't allowed in China, right? Wrong. Chinese people aren't aware that they were being restricted at all. I started asking my Chinese friends, some of whom are lawyers, and they all told me the same thing. They can say and do what they like. They can complain. They can protest. They can demonstrate if they want to. Many of them told me something I already knew. Each city has a hotline for what the city likes to call suggestions, but really are for complaints. You just pick up your phone, dial 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in any city, and you get through to a department of the government that isn't controlled locally, and that department will handle your suggestion. What Chinese people can't do is much less complicated than some other countries. They can't spread misinformation. If it's wrong and they cause some harm to society, they'll be punished. If it's right, nothing will happen to them. They can't use hate speech. If it's abusive, aggressive, or even ridicule that could be offensive, they aren't allowed to do it. But usually, if they do, the worst that will happen is a warning not to do it again. And if they do it again, then punishments can escalate. They can't incite violence. That seems fair. If they do commit an offense, they'll probably be sentenced either to an administrative detention, which is usually 7 or a maximum of 14 days. This is what Amnesty International calls punishment without a crime, but is in fact better termed as punishment without a conviction. If the matter is serious or continues after warnings, then those people might be put before a court. People in China don't get locked up for doing nothing. They get locked up for breaking laws. I've lived in China 18 years. I've never met anyone except one foreigner who has received a custodial punishment, and he was drunk driving. Even Wikipedia admits there are appeals to this process if someone thinks they've been wrongfully detained. It also goes on to say that in this so-called authoritarian regime of China, with 1.7 million, it has the second highest numbers of prisoners in the world. What it fails to mention is that, number one, with less than a quarter of China's population, the United States has over 2 million people in prison. For the record, the US incarceration rate dropped during Trump's era to 810 per 100,000 compared to China's 121 per 100,000. So you're 4 times more likely to be in prison if you live in the USA. NGOs such as Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch constantly criticize China for a law which they call picking quarrels and provoking troubles. They point to it as a peculiarly Chinese thing, but this law also exists in English. Over there it's called breach of the peace, and like China, people don't usually go to court for it, but can be arrested and removed from the scene to avoid further breaches. It descends from a British law called disorderly conduct. What is disorderly conduct? Picking quarrels, provoking troubles? Unsurprisingly, almost all of the United States states have the same laws, which are, according to the First Amendment Encyclopedia, designed to cover conduct that is disorderly and disturbs the public peace and quiet of a community. But also over there, it includes homelessness and vagrancy, things that are not offenses in China. So once again, we see hypocritical statements about alleged restrictions in China, not just mirrored in Western laws, but amplified and extended. The First Amendment is important because it says Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, which sounds a bit like a reversal of Article 36 of the Chinese Constitution, which after saying citizens shall enjoy freedom of religion goes on to say no state organ, social organization or individual shall coerce citizens to believe or not to believe in any religion. In other words, in the USA, anyone can force you or coerce you into a religion. Congress can't make a law to stop them. While in China you have free choice and no one, not even your parents, can force you into their system of belief. The US First Amendment goes on to say pretty much the same things as China's Article 35. Americans have freedom of speech, press, and the right to peaceably assemble and petition the government for redress of grievances. And there's nothing wrong with that, except, as they allege happens in China but doesn't, protests in the US are brutally clamped down. Police arrive with riot equipment, tear gas, rubber bullets. Apparently peaceful protesters are met by quasi-military style responses, driving armored vehicles, dressed as stormtroopers, as any online search will demonstrate. I'm sure you all saw the demonstrations in China late last year. There were plenty of police officers, but usually wearing normal uniforms or medical uniforms. They weren't armed, there was no tear gas, no rubber bullets were used anyway. There's an American website called the First Amendment Encyclopedia, and it's extensive. There are literally thousands of stated cases where people have fallen foul of free speech laws, and it's just too hard to go into them all here. But listen to this. Freedom of speech in the United States is not protected if you use obscenity, fighting words, defamation, including libel and slander, child pornography, perjury, blackmail, incitement to imminent lawless action, true threats, solicitations to commit a crime, treason if it's committed verbally, and plagiarism of copyrighted material. Do you notice the same sorts of things which are forbidden in China are not protected in America by the First Amendment providing free speech? And here's one last final point to leave you with. In the United States, there is a law enacted in 1954 preventing Americans from legally joining the Communist Party. Now I know there'll be many people commenting this and say, this law isn't used. Believe me, it's still there, and it will surely be used if America gets to a point where large numbers of people do join the Communist Party of the USA because the current form of democracy isn't working. And as one eminent sociologist reported, and I quote, "There is no place in democracy for those who wish to abolish it, even with a peaceful vote," end of quote. So even if the majority want it, democracy US style is not going to give the Americans what they want. While the USA has made the Communist Party illegal, and it's never repealed that law, they have never written a law against being a member of the Ku Klux Klan. And that to me says everything I need to know about the American legal system and its thoughts on inclusion and diversity. Once again, thanks for watching Jerry's Take on China. I'll see you next time.